town had gathered to witness the unearthing of a time capsule buried 50 years ago, a project meant to commemorate the town's history and offer future generations a glimpse into their past. Daniel, a local historian, was tasked with documenting the event. He stood by as the workers carefully extracted the metal box from the ground, covered in dirt and time-worn rust. As they pried it open, Daniel expected the usual relics, old letters, photographs, maybe a newspaper or two, but what they found was far more puzzling. Inside were several items that made no sense: a sleek, metallic device that resembled nothing from the 1970s, a book with strange symbols instead of words, and images that seemed like they came straight out of a futuristic movie. The crowd murmured, confused, and eventually dispersed as the bizarre nature of the items became clear. Later that evening, Daniel took the items back to his study. Intrigued, he examined the book closely. The symbols were unfamiliar, but they seemed to follow a pattern. Alongside them were drawings, strange machines, towering buildings, and people in clothing that looked out of place for any time period he recognized. Something about it all felt prophetic, but how could a time capsule for 50 years ago contain objects from a future that hadn't happened yet? As Daniel sifted through the materials, he found a name scribbled in small letters on the inside of the book: Margaret Halford. It rang a bell. She had been a teenager when the capsule was buried. Curiosity piqued. Daniel decided he had to find out more about this woman and what role she had played in this strange mystery. Daniel's research led him to a small, unassuming building on the outskirts of town, an elderly care home. Margaret Halford, now in her late 70s, resided there. Rumors had circulated about her for years. Some said she was eccentric, claiming to see visions of the future. People had dismissed her stories as the ramblings of a troubled mind, and she had faded into obscurity. As Daniel entered the facility, he felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He found Margaret sitting by the window, staring out at the garden with a far-off look in her eyes. When he introduced himself and explained his purpose, she smiled knowingly, as if she had been expecting him. "You've seen the capsule," she said softly, her voice fragile but clear. "You've seen the future I tried to warn about." Daniel was stunned. How could she know? Margaret gestured toward the chair beside her, inviting him to sit. As he settled in, she began to tell him her story. She had been just 16 when the vision started, glimpses of a world not yet realized, filled with strange technologies and a looming catastrophe that threatened to tear everything apart. The images had been vivid, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. Desperate to warn others, she had drawn what she saw, filled notebooks with her predictions, and finally placed some of these artifacts in the time capsule. "I thought maybe if they saw it in the future, they'd understand. They'd stop it from happening," she explained, her eyes brimming with emotion. But no one believed me. Daniel listened intently, his mind racing. Could it be true? Was Margaret really a seer of some kind, glimpsing the future through some unknown power? Over the following days, Daniel spent hours at the care home, sitting with Margaret as she detailed her visions. She described the strange, sleek machines that had appeared in her mind, the towering structures of a future city, and the disasters she had seen, an event so catastrophic it would change the world forever. But the most disturbing part of her visions had been the people in positions of power who would either avert the disaster or allow it to unfold. "They didn't listen then," she said with a bitter smile, "but maybe they will now." Daniel found himself poring over the items from the capsule, hoping to find a way to connect them with the modern world. The strange device, he realized, resembled a futuristic communication tool, though it was far more advanced than anything currently in use. The book, with its cryptic symbols, seemed to contain a code, one that, when cracked, could reveal more than the future Margaret had seen. With Margaret's guidance, Daniel began piecing together the puzzle. She showed him how to interpret the symbols, how to see the patterns hidden in the drawings. Slowly, the warnings became clearer. The images were of future technology, tools and systems that could either advance humanity or lead to its downfall. The disaster she had predicted seemed tied to the misuse of this technology, a warning that, if not heeded, would result in chaos. But something was missing. Daniel knew that without concrete proof, no one would take Margaret seriously. He needed more than just her visions. He needed a way to show people that what she had seen was real, that her warnings were valid. As Daniel continued to dig deeper into Margaret's visions, a startling revelation emerged. Hidden in the book's cryptic pages were references to specific dates and places. key moments in time that could either trigger or prevent the catastrophic event she had foreseen. One date stood out. It was less than a month away. Panic gripped Daniel as he realized the gravity of the situation. If Margaret was right, the world was on the brink of disaster, and there was little time to stop it. He raced to find connections between her predictions and real-world events, reaching out to experts, government officials, and anyone who could listen. But just like Margaret had faced 50 years ago, he encountered skepticism and dismissal. Meanwhile, Margaret's health began to decline. The weight of carrying these visions for so long had taken its toll on her, and she seemed to know that her time was running out. "You have to stop it, Daniel," she urged him, her voice weak but determined. "It's not too late. You have the key, the capsule, the symbols. They'll understand if you show them." But even with the clues in hand, Daniel couldn't help but wonder, could he really prevent the catastrophe she had seen, or was he too late? As the predicted date approached, Daniel grew desperate. He pieced together the final parts of the puzzle, discovering that the key to preventing the catastrophe lay in stopping a new technological development set to launch. A device meant to revolutionize communication, but with dangerous potential if mishandled. The images in Margaret's book suddenly made sense. The future she had seen was one where this technology spiraled out of control, leading to widespread chaos. In a last-ditch effort, Daniel contacted the developers of the technology, presenting his findings and Margaret's warnings. It wasn't easy, but finally one of the engineers, a woman named Evelyn, listened. She too had concerns about the rapid development of the technology without proper safeguards. With Evelyn's help, Daniel managed to delay the launch, allowing for critical safety protocols to be put in place. The day of the predicted disaster came and went without incident, and for the first time Daniel breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps Margaret's visions had been heeded after all. Weeks later, Daniel visited Margaret in her care home. She smiled weakly when she saw him, her eyes filled with understanding. "You did it," she whispered. "The future, it's safer now." As she drifted into sleep, Daniel realized that Margaret's gift had saved the world from a disaster no one else had ever seen coming. And though her visions had burdened her for decades, they had also given humanity a second chance. The time capsule, once a mystery, had become a warning and a promise.